Hello and welcome to Continuing Clockwise, a channel about games, gamers, and gaming. I'm Chad. So today I'm going to tell you about my 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons character, Prince Vespius of House Liadon, translated into Silver Frond into Common. Prince Vespius is a high elf from Mythdraenor. At least I think he's from Mythdraenor. I play him in a Curse of Strahd campaign, so we didn't really spend a lot of time in the Forgotten Realms Faerun stuff. Hasn't come up. But anyway, he was raised as a noble and is very accustomed to getting his own way. He has spent many years practicing as a swordsman and as a calligrapher. And shortly before the campaign began, he had experienced some sort of tragedy, and his dominant hand, which is his left hand, was gravely injured. So really setting him back as far as his sword skill has been concerned. So when I think of his left hand, his injured hand, I think of, if you remember the American politician, he's long since retired, but I believe he's still alive, of Bob Dole. So it's Bob Dole's right hand. But anyway, it's kind of clenched all the time, doesn't have a lot of mobility. That's how I imagine Vespius' left hand when the campaign begins. And then while, generally ambidextrous as an expert swordsman, his skill has greatly diminished as he tries to develop his right hand. And he has to use his left hand to hold a special shield, a shield that it was designed to accommodate his injury. So before the campaign began, he left home with a member of his royal court, his gardener, who is actually a player character, a druid named Elsbeth, to learn more about the outside world, to help people, and just to adventure, as you do in D&D. So that was all backstory. And so here's what he's experienced over the last 2 years, two actual years, but it's been less than that in game years. So he met up with a group of companions, and they were all tricked by the Vistani into traveling into Ravenloft. Now, Vespius still holds a grudge about that, and even though they have some allies with the Vistani, he's still more than a little frustrated and actually angry that happened. During his time in Ravenloft, Vespius has contracted and been cured of lycanthropy, and he was killed by a group of revenants in Argynvost Holt. So he existed as a ghost for a little while, and then once the situation was cleared up with the occupants of Argynvost Holt, he was brought back. But he was brought back as a revenant himself, which came with some really notable changes. His primary goal is a little unclear, but he knows that he is destined to return to the crypts beneath Ravenloft, and that's where he will meet his end. And as an undead revenant, he has a bit of a haunted and weary look to him, though there's still something of a sparkle left in his eye. And that transformation into a revenant also largely healed his left hand. It's still not back up to the level of skill that it was before it was injured, but now it functions normally, so he can use a normal shield without too much concern. And after a recent encounter in the Amber Temple, he was given let me catch it right here, the Gift of Xantris, which made him even a stronger leader and has really changed his outlook. So now he has this oddly, especially for a Gothic campaign, an oddly optimistic view on things. So now Vespius has just a few goals, really 3 goals left in life. The first is, frankly, he needs a magical weapon, a magical finesse weapon, because really so many of the things that they've been facing are resistant or immune to non-magic weapons. So he needs something to fight Strahd with. His second goal is to defeat Strahd. He knows that will happen in the crypts beneath Castle Ravenloft. And then finally, he's got this concern. His third goal is that he's concerned about how the rest of his group, especially Elsbeth, who he's known from before the campaign, will carry on after Ravenloft. So that was who Vespius is. Now I want to talk a little bit about how he came into being from a creative side. Like most D&D players, I am thinking about character concepts literally all the time. I get inspirations from movies, from TV, from books, from everywhere. But I don't really stat up characters unless I have a specific reason to. I enjoy that process, but not enough to do it without a campaign to apply them to. So it was about 2 years ago when Galen was talking about starting this campaign. I happened to be in a phase where I was watching a lot of Game of Thrones. And I was particularly fascinated by Jorah Mormont. So for a large portion of that show, he acts as a bodyguard and advisor to Daenerys Targaryen. Vespius also has a little Jaime Lannister in him, especially the expert swordsman and some of the hand injury. It's changed, but that was influenced. And another big influence for Vespius is Coram Jalen Ursi, who is the protagonist in, I think it was about 6 Michael Moorcock novels, so 2 different trilogies. the Sword Trilogy and the Silver Hand Trilogy. Highly recommended. Especially the first book really outlines an interesting views on elven culture. They don't call them elves, but they are totally elves. So a lot of kind of my thinking about Vespius comes from there. I also had this idea to create a really privileged lawful good character who has some really notable blind spots. There's definitely a little social commentary there about how easy it is to be magnanimous and to be lawful good when you come from a place of privilege. But I don't try not to get too over the top with it. And then as the party was forming and my friend created Elsbeth as a servant of Vespius, that idea of him as an advisor really started to shift. And then before too long, Vespius wound up as really the leader of the party. Now, it was not really an intent of mine from the outset, but I realized that what happened was that Vespius is just bossy and arrogant, but not a jerk. So he, not too much of a jerk anyway. So, he just wound up kind of as the kind of the face and the leader. And an important part about Vespius is that he actually does care about people, both those who need his help globally, and he cares very much about his friends in the adventuring party. Mechanically, I chose the Battlemaster fighter because I wanted to have plenty of options. I wanted some fidgety bits in combat. Now, when I was looking at him, if you think about, say, Jaime Lannister, and you think about Jorah, they're not that super duper strong. And I really couldn't imagine Vespius as strength-based. So I experimented a little bit and actually used strength as Vespius's dump stat. So dexterity is his main stat, hence the need for a finesse weapon. And I think it's worked pretty well. He's at least viable. He may not be, supremely optimized, but he works. And I'm a little bummed. I couldn't find my original notes. So from when I created Vespius, typically I just handwrite up the character during original creation. So I'll write some notes about my image of them, and then I'll just kind of write up, through the process of character creation, and then I'll transfer it over to an actual character sheet for play. But of course, I do have my character sheet now, which I'll go ahead and pull up. So this is Vespius' current state. So at 9th level. So I'm not going to go into all the details about how I manage my character sheet, but if you're interested in that, please let me know. And also let me know what you think. If you have any questions about Vespius, or I would also love to hear about the characters that you're using right now and what creative influences you have used to build them. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. Please click the like button. And until next week, game great.